Before we turn it over to that board, I just wanted to introduce them and just acknowledge the hard work that all of our DEI members have put in over this entire past year. This is the first time that the Mount Lebanon resident DEI initiatives are all coming together and presenting their initial recommendations to the commission. It's the first time that we get to hear this, and we'll ask some clarifying questions so that we can support the initiatives moving forward. But this is a very, very important moment, and I want to acknowledge that. I want to set the stage for this work by paying tribute to some of those who came before us, those who first shaped and tended our land and planted the tree species we enjoy today, to those who created and sustained our homes of worship, and those who founded our local government. And I'll open by paying honor and respect to the first settlers in Mount Lebanon. Long before it was called Mount Lebanon, our First Nations people, the Osage and the Shawnees people. They were on this land for over 10,000 years and the predominant inhabitants until the 1800s. Through acknowledging, honoring, and celebrating our individual and collective ancestries and traditions, our histories, our ways of worship, our ableness, our identities, we'll grow richer together and stronger as a community. Through this work, it's my hope that we can individually and collectively reflect upon our diverse identities and emerge a more unified community. Over the past year, there were 4 named DEI areas the Commission requested assistance from our residents this year. And for this initial year of research, we hope to gain a better understanding of what the structure and entity will be optimal to support this work long-term, as well as what to prioritize with regards to DEI, because there is a lot of work to do. The 4 areas that we explored this year were community awareness and community building, hiring, police engagement, and DEI recognition, event planning, and incident response. Back on October 12th, which was our last public discussion session in the same room, we heard recommendations from the community awareness group number 4, as well as from community awareness group number 1, as well as group 4, which is the incident response group. We grouped those 2 groups together because there was a lot of overlap in their recommendations, especially with regards to event planning. Today, we get to hear from group number 2 and group number 3. Group number 2 is the hiring group, and group number 3 is the police engagement group. And there was overlap with the hiring components of both of those groups. So I think it worked out well that we get to hear from both of them today. And I'd like to ask Commissioner Flynn as the liaison to group number 2, who's up first at 6:30 to introduce that group.
I just want to say that this has been a fantastic process for everybody that has been involved. This group came together very quickly and became very effective, right out of the gate. Very made up of strong professionals, lots with deep HR experience, really brought thoughtful and innovative ideas to the table. I have been very impressed with the entire process. I can only say, thank you and congratulations for all of the hard work. And I know that the whole commission is looking forward to everything you have to present.
Hello, I'm Kim Martin. I moved in Halloween week in 2002, so 19 years ago. So this is Halloween's always our celebration. But I will be speaking first, but a few of us from the group will be sharing with you our presentation today. And we also wanted to thank all of you, and particularly Bonnie and Ian, who've been great partners to us, because they've really sort of opened up the space and sort of let us infiltrate and get into their territory a bit. Have been very welcoming through that process, so we very much appreciate the welcomeness there. You can go ahead to the next slide. Our group 2 was asked to improve the diversity of Mount Lebanon boards and improve the diversity of Mount Lebanon employees. Specifically in our charter, we were asked, it said that Mount Lebanon municipality will retain ownership of hiring practices and decisions, and we should give input and recommendation only on how to expand hiring pools. We thought it was just important to just note that we stepped over those bounds. and we did that purposefully, because we felt in order to provide Mount Lebanon with the direction needed, that we really needed to step further. I mean, diverse candidates are looking for environments and cultures where they can see themselves being accepted and included. So it really goes beyond just finding the candidates. It's creating an environment. And so you'll see it reflected in our recommendations is that. So just wanted to share that as a start. You can go ahead to the next one. We put together a framework just to make the presentation a little bit easier to take in and understand, really in 3 buckets. One is talent acquisition, which is that process of how you find and hire the talent or select talent for the boards. The talent development piece, which is, again, creating a culture by developing your in-house staff, commissioners, everyone, to create that environment that is welcoming and with a foundation of values, communication, accountability, and measurement. And so you'll hear in our presentation from those 3 buckets, and we'll start with the talent acquisition bucket. We handed out a very long, detailed presentation for all of you. So this presentation that you're seeing here is just the synopsis of that. The talent acquisition bucket has really 3 main recommendations. I'm going to cover them high level, and of course you can dig into the report and ask any questions that you have based on those recommendations. The 3 recommendations start with inclusive job descriptions. So really focusing on the job postings, there are many creative and non-biased language postings that are available out on the internet. We actually provided some links directly in the report that you can look at as examples from other communities and other, and this is a cost-free, easy starting point, which is to just update the language of the job postings, removing gendered language and other suggestions. So that's part 1. Part 2 of this is the sourcing piece. So again, and the second part, and I'm moving fast, so let me know if you have any questions, but on page 5 gets into the details of the where can you find diverse candidates, and there are some links there that will connect us with possibilities and opportunities, community partners that are providing development experiences and will connect us to diverse talent. We also just noted that there's 35 volunteers working diligently in these groups that are very interested as well, and that just another you could tap into that as a resource in looking for diverse candidates as well for the board.
Would you like questions kind of within each recommendation number, or do you want us to save it for the very end?
You can go ahead and ask questions along the way. Yes. Please.
Okay, and so is that, are you saying that we should make sure that we advertise to our boards?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, yes, that is what we meant.
And they're aware of job postings.
Yes.
Well, I think also what that she's saying, because I think this might be getting a little bit lost in some of the discussion we're having, is that this group was about both hiring and making sure there are boards and authorities.
Hiring employees and
And-
advisory boards.
And hiring employees and then also selecting people for our boards and authorities. So how do we broaden that pool and of applicants and also people that we select?
And if I
So I think what they're
understood-
saying here is you've got 35 people there that are, that you could.
They come with their networks.
Exactly.
Yes.
The boards and authorities.
Perfect, advertise through them. And in the very beginning, I think you spoke to retention, right? Like it's not enough to just advertise, but we want to work on retaining.
And creating an environment where people want to come, right? Because I think the challenge for those of us who have a background in HR is you can bring diverse talent in from a lot of different places, but have you created a culture where they want to be, where they feel welcome, and where they want to stay? And really, all of us, we're all diverse, right? Are we creating an environment where everybody can be who they are and they can feel welcome? Ultimately, is the goal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The last part of this section, before we move on to the next section, is a full process audit, and this is just a recommendation. It's on the details are on page 7 of the full report, but this is really digging a little bit beyond just the language of the job postings itself. But there is a lot of bias that comes through the process of talent acquisition. Unconscious bias. I know that you've heard from the other groups as well about unconscious bias training and some other opportunities, and my teammates here will also talk more about that as well. But through a process, it's not just people, but processes can have bias in them as well. So the recommendation for the process audit is to look at every stage of the hiring process, both for the board and for employee hiring, and looking for bias, opportunities to remove bias from every stage of that process. So the job postings is just step one. When you move on from that, the question is, do you have a diverse slate of candidates? And then who's making the decisions on who moves forward? What kinds of questions are you asking through the interview process? Again, are they creating an open, non-biased environment? So really going through a full process audit to make sure that the process itself does not have inherent bias in it, because otherwise that could be a reason why you continue to see a lack of diversity in the system, is because the process itself could be generating a lot of that bias.
I think it'd be helpful to state an example of what a bias process is. Like, for instance, when you have a job description that is made by one person, you have just the referrals from that hiring manager applying to the job, and just the hiring manager interviewing with just some sort of support from HR. That's the typical speed you need people, right? So you just go through the motion of just bringing people in, checking background checks, user screening, all that process of onboarding, but not really thinking through the decision making. So, so that's a really good example of a process of selection out there that is fairly new, that is very subjective to bias.
And also having just one person doing the interviews, making the decision, because then you just have a single perspective through that process, that inherently creates a bias as well. So making sure there's differing perspectives, multiple interviewers, different people bringing a voice to the table when you're going through that process is critically important as well. So those were the 3 recommendations under the talent acquisition bucket. And then
I did have one question
Yeah,
on
sure.
that I highlighted and underlined, which was there could be no cost associated with that audit, because we could leverage one of the members of the subcommittee to.
Yep. Yep. There's a number of us that are HR professionals, and we are happy to support and help
We are accountable for running audits
at our own companies. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Technology really helps, but technology is only part of the solution.
Sorry, how long would that audit process take, do you think?
The process is really, and like I said, Bonnie and Ian have been very open about what they have so far. So it really is a matter of, it would probably take a number of hours just to make sure we understand each of the steps of the hiring process for each of how the decisions are made from a board perspective versus how decisions are made from an employee perspective. So it would be a number of hours, I think, for each grouping. But I think we have some willing volunteers to work through that. I think the last part I forgot to mention, because this also goes along with what you heard last week, is that we did put in a recommendation that a DEI officer ultimately would be a really good move for the municipality. I know that groups 1 and 4 also recommended that. That is part of this 1C recommendation as well.
Okay. Very good. So the next step, which is pretty much a sister bucket to talent acquisition, is talent development. And there's a lot that goes behind talent development that will ensure the cultural piece that Kim was talking about, related to not only the experience of the candidate applying for a job at this municipality, but also the experience of those championing the process that is less biased and more objective and more inclusive. So we don't think that, again, focusing just in hiring is going to be a sustainable solution for the municipality, nor even something that will empower those in charge of the process. So it's very easy for us to here propose something. The difficult thing is to empower those in charge of the process to keep it going and actually create a culture about, championing those things. So this is where the mind shift happens. Mindset shift happens around the talent development, starting at the top, right? Because the buck stops here with the board, the sponsors. So if there is gray zone within the top of the house, likely you will see that trickling effect, minimizing, sabotaging all change efforts. So the diversity, equity, and inclusion approach or agenda, it's no different from no different than any other change management. So starting at the top, it's very important that people understand either if they're a board commissioner, if they're owning the process, or they just have to, as a hiring manager, sponsor that like in their own department, how their goals are tied to the overall overarching agenda of creating more of an inclusive environment. And that goes through the process of goal setting that is highly tied to the mission statement for the municipality, which we've all seen in previous calls. So going through this conversation that starts at the top and then cascading down through the leadership and staff, many talented people, part of the board, but also outside consultants are very capable and educated and qualified to facilitate a process like that. That will be your compass. Think about the mission statement, the goal setting as a reflection of your values and things that will help build the aspirational goals for the future boards to come. So you're always going to be raising the bar higher as you set the goals for the municipality and yourselves. The second item is the DEI basics, which is a really fun thing to put in place. So basics in training and DEI, they benefit again, both internal team cultures as well as the external, the stakeholders, meaning the residents and the vendors and the partners that come and interact with the internal stakeholders. There are absolutely several options of training available today. A lot of science has been produced in the past 10 years on this topic. We know what doesn't work, right? We know what actually holds ground and creates sustainability and empowerment. And at the end of the day, what we want is to cascade that down through, again, the existing process. So diversity, equity, and inclusion shouldn't be seen as something separate, but it's part of how you hire, how you interact with the community, how you make decisions. So it's a difficult thing in the beginning to establish those connecting dots, but through training, those bridges will start becoming more obvious. And finally, some technical training on diversity, equity, inclusion, or bias breaking or bias prevention in a hiring process. That's when really we zoom in on the hiring process itself. We look at each point of the employee engagement in a staff municipality, but also in the life cycle of a board member. And we look at, what are the possible things, the touch points that can actually make people stay or make people go, and how can specific champions and sponsors from the municipality have an active role in mitigating bias and actually advocating for objective processes. So with that, the next section, which is a good segue, is our insurance for success here.
Yes. So if we take a step back, and just as Kim and Liv have said, we really need to take a step back, because if our only focus is how do we increase the amount of applicants or the diversity of the applicant pool that comes to our borough, we're already well behind the 8 ball. And I think that's one of the things that we have discovered when we started looking at the research into some other organizations and other communities that have successfully implemented these DEI tactics, and the growth that you see in the community because of that. I think that it's really important that we look not just at what those numbers are going to look like, but how we grow our community so that there's an open space at the table for everybody. One of the things that I heard from one of the groups last week was talking about Mount Lebanon becoming a certified welcoming community. And when I heard them talking about that, it just really I don't even know what word I'm trying to say, but really hit the mark for me that this was something that we needed to start to show people when they start looking inside of our community. Because as people are coming up with job listings or places that they would like to go to be able to find work, some of the first places they're going to go is to the online organization, to see the website, to see the people that work there. And so a lot of the recommendations that we're talking about are very free and easy to implement within the borough and to adopt as part of the expectations for borough employees. And that was really why we focused on a lot of those things. So some of the things that we put in is employees making sure to add their preferred pronouns and their preferred name to their signature line in their emails. And this would be a very easy, inclusive tactic so that when you are communicating with prospective employees or prospective interviewees, then it's going to demonstrate to them the level of awareness that the community has in their strategy and being opening and inviting in their community. Also looking at things like having contact information, work contact information, obviously not private information. But when you're putting people's names and pictures on the website, what you're doing is increasing transparency for the community and provides a really easy way for people in the community to verify people that say that they work for the borough. So that is a protective measure, not only for you as employees, but also for people in the community, so that there's a very clear and easy way to see how to communicate with people. Using things like floating holiday options for people that do not celebrate Western Christian holidays. I know that many organizations will offer employees the ability to use sick time or holiday pay, but it really isn't fair to ask somebody to use holiday pay when all of their other coworkers are able to use their holiday pay for whatever they want. So providing something like floating holiday options for prospective employees is something that will tell them that this is a community that wants them for who they are, not just for what they're going to be pushing out. So those are some of the things that when we were really taking a look at what are people going to be looking for, and if their first experience is coming into a boardroom where they've never had the opportunity to see just how diverse our community actually is, then I think that really leaves us at a disadvantage when we're working with other people. There are some trainings that we also suggested. One of them is an LGBTQIA 101 training, and that's offered through the Prasad Center. I included it in the more detailed write-up of our recommendations. The cost of that is $250. That's a one-time training. It's like 2.5 hours, something like that. It's a local person who works for Prasad. He's an amazing presenter. But that would be something easy to be able to offer to your employees, and even offering incentives to your employees if it's something you might offer in the evening, offering some sort of incentive to employees to volunteer their time and commit to this. Things like offering food to go along with it, or offering them an hour of paid time off, something along those lines that might encourage them where they might not necessarily want to do it, but it still gives you a lot of really good information that can be passed on to the local employees. So those are just some of the examples of that. And then the last part under the Vibrant Pittsburgh group, I think that this index initiative that was found, and I'm not the one that really did a lot of the work on that, so I get confused when we talk about it, but I know we really thought that there was a lot of really great information. And there is a way for us to try and get involved in the 2022 initiative. And so that was something that we really wanted the commission to take a strong look at now, because deadlines might be approaching. And this would really be something that would help give us this baseline assessment of where we are, what we're doing well, what we want to improve on, and a little bit more clear vision for what the future of Mount Lebanon is moving forward. So I think being able to jump on that for the 2022 season could really give some really excellent segue into the next step of this project.
I have some questions about this recommendation. The $250 cost, is that per employee or is that per group of employees?
For a group of employees, it's a
Okay.
one-time cost.
One-time cost, is there a maximum number you happen to know?
I mean, there's what, 130 people or so in the
Right.
group. I can't imagine
Okay.
that would be a problem.
Do you think that's the total cost?
Yeah.
And then regarding the recommendation of putting on the website all full-time employees' names and pictures and even preferred pronouns. What if an employee doesn't prefer to have their picture up? Is that okay? Should we just respect that?
Of course.
Okay.
Mhm.
Just
Of
making
course,
sure.
Mhm. I think it's something to think about, though, in the way that you want to be presenting it to people, where it's not something that we're trying to out people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, just being conscientious that when we're presenting this to employees, that this is a way for us to be transparent. If you see somebody that you're having business dealings with across the street, now you can say hi to each other, or,
Yeah.
we're a small community. Mount Lebanon is not that big. And I think we should be encouraging transparency and community togetherness. So I just think something, obviously it could be a safety issue too, but in the interest of transparency.
It could also, you could take steps of group, like, it doesn't have to be individual
Yes.
one at a time, but it could be like, here's our.
Right, I've seen that done, like a team photos of the
Team
front
photos.
photos, or even, however they would get it.
So behind all this, I think what, the message is, we spent a lot of time talking about accountability and measurements and how in the past, if we quote a survey, I'm sure you're gonna fall off the chair now, how companies are charging for surveys and managing that, because just the amount of responses you need in order to keep a longitudinal survey writing alive. We're exploring some innovative ways to kind of tap into networks with universities as well as other pro bono consultants that could serve as well. And I think the bottom line is it's doable if we are okay with hearing the messages. Because usually also the barriers are not only in the budget, but also with the assumption that what if we hear the bad news? What if we hear negative messages? Do we have to respond to every single one of them? It's almost like a ticket that is submitted that you need to close. And when the reality is that we will hear that the survey, it is aimed not only to surface the experience that residents, the staff, and leaders in the municipality are having, but also help us hone in, because the landscape of opportunities and the diversity, equity, inclusion are so broad. We do need to agree with the focus. So that's one comment I'd like to bring in. Another thing that Rachel facilitated in our discussion, and then later we developed that, was around the importance of having the brand, right? So the brand, not only for those who are coming in, but also for those who are working here. So they feel valued, they don't feel invisible, they feel that their experience matter as well. And if you're hiring great people, they have stories to tell. We're gonna be more brand ambassadors.
When you mentioned survey, were you talking about surveying residents or municipal employees?
We broke it down into the report in 4 categories. So leaders, the staff, individual contributors, residents, and ordinance.
And the Vibrant Pittsburgh Index Initiative it literally is just a baseline assessment that gives standard categories, 10 standard categories that can be offered to government office departments. And it gives the standards of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a consistent language that other organizations in Pittsburgh are following as well. So it's just a good start.
Frameworks always help.
Yeah. Benchmark, right? Really helps.
Yes, absolutely. We're doing so much new, which is really nice to be able to tap into the lessons learned of our organizations.
Questions? That is all we have.
That's all you have for the
That's all you have.
presentation. Okay, I'm opening up to commissioners and municipal staff.
My question was sort of preempted by your note about budgets on surveys, because my question was, what's the cost for it now? What would be the cost for ongoing surveys? And then I did have a follow-up question, but the Vibrant Pittsburgh framework kind of answers it. Is if we do a survey, what are the metrics? What do we look for? And it's not, I don't think, just having X number of certain groups represented in hiring or practices or things like that. I think there has to be more to it. And I guess if we kind of follow a framework, we can then do it, like you said, longitudinally, and then mark, hey, have we grown? Have we gone backwards? If we did go backwards, why? And then we can at least have something to look at and say, well, what changed? How do we address that? And do it quickly, rather than where we are now, I think, which is, we try to put best practices in place for all these individual items. Sometimes we don't kind of cross-reference them or stop and say, let's take a look at some numbers and where are we? So maybe something like that's a pretty good idea for us to kind of put in place and do that baseline.
The metrics are important because they not only inform how we are operating in today in comparison to other similar size boroughs, but also they confirm what have you done in the first step, like on the goal setting. So the goal setting should be translated in a subset of metrics to connect and drive accountability through performance reviews, through specific targeted training, through mapping what teams are actually more on board than others. You're not going to have everybody on board at the same time. You know, it will be a web of flow until it becomes part of what is expected to the role. So in order for you to have, or any leaders who have visibility of what is happening actually on the floor in the teams and out there, you do require some sort of like focus and measurement discipline.
I really liked the holistic approach that you all brought to it, because there's a reason, obviously, that we ask professionals who do this to come and give us a recommendation, right? Because we were kind of focusing on increasing the hiring pool. And I think that it's, as a person who works within an organization that is very male dominated and wants to bring more women forward in the organization, not always do they understand that it's not just having the person there, it's actually listening to the person and having the person feel welcome and feeling like they can participate in a way that's meaningful. So I really liked that piece of it. And one of the things I wanted to ask about was, and this is really minor, but it struck me, we are working on our process for our boards and authorities and wanting to have them run more effectively, more efficiently. And part of this process was also, how can we make sure that we are having more people apply that are of diverse backgrounds? But I really liked what you had to say about beginning every board tenure with training that emphasizes equity, sensitive communication strategies, and inclusive policies. I like that from a diverse DEI perspective, but I also liked it from a process perspective, because what I've seen happen with some of the boards is we just bring new members on, but we never onboard them.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, they're trying to catch up, and it takes them 6 months to sort of figure out what's
How to
going on.
contribute, yeah.
Exactly. So just, I like that as part of a even bigger piece of process, including the DEI piece of it and the way that we can, it's just an example of how you can weave DEI into everything. So, appreciate that. Do you have recommendations on who would be like
Mapping or creating an onboarding process for the yeah. So this has been research and is available. Yeah, so I can submit more
Okay,
literature on this.
Thanks. Do you want to, I know that you have Andrew's email. If you want to send it through Andrew, he'll forward it on to the whole commission. That would be really appreciated. I'd love to see it too.
And Bamboo HR, which I believe is a platform that we have here, we also can enable that for the board members. So we can use technology to make it more streamlined for every board member today and tomorrow. Great.
Which is an interesting concept. We track board members by spreadsheet, if I recall.
I do.
So it's an interesting, exploration of just thinking about how do we use the people technology in different ways.
And you can see everything you do behind the scenes.
We also track them using Granicus.
Oh, in Granicus. Okay.
So that's not. It generates spreadsheets.
Okay. I get the spreadsheet. Okay.
And have patience with us. We are drinking from the information fire hose right now.
Yes.
So it's going to take some time for all of us to absorb all the information you presented, and of course the other groups as well. But thank you for putting the time into this. We very much appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank you for the opportunity.
Please don't hesitate to reach out with those questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Follow up for fun.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Steve, because we've had questions from other groups about the process, the timeline, going through these now, having the public conversations, the official recommendations coming in, having time to go through them all, and then, we've got stuff to look at separately and legal conversations for some of these and hiring and things like that.
And we want to be very deliberative. I mean,
Yeah, very thoughtful.
This.
It's very important. There's a lot of recommendations.
Yes.
I think I originally thought that the DEI work would continue on through the CRP, and now I see the over 100 pages of recommendations. That's just not the right structure to be the primary owner of that work. That's not fair to the CRB, at least within its current structure, at least unless it's completely transformed into something else overnight. And I also am seeing that I think every group so far that's presented, we've heard from 3 groups, have said that they recommend a municipal employee on staff, at least part-time, that is the DEI point person. And we weren't expecting that recommendation. At least I personally wasn't expecting that recommendation, and that is a big consideration. It's a big deal to hire someone. We don't take it lightly. It's a huge tax expense, but it is fair. It is being seriously considered because it's a recommendation from all of our advisory groups that we're leaning on heavy. So that kind of shifted things a little bit as well. As if people are saying we really need someone to be accountable for that, we're not sure how to do that, or if we're not sure what that would look like and if what the structure is. So that's why. But we're
We have a job description for that.
yeah, that helps. I love
it.
We need it. We need that information. I know
We
you
also
yeah.
built this thing, our fearless secretary over here.
Yes.
An incredible
Yes.
Yes.
coordinator of all this work for us. And you said you mentioned this year, I was like, oh, I forgot to.
Yeah,
thank you.
We couldn't have done it without it.
Years of HR experience,
Wow, 100 years of HR experience.
Give or take,
Thank you.
One year, 20 plus year experience, So that we are fortunate, a lot of HR background,
Thank you for giving us so much of your time.
Yeah, and I do want to say, Scar, thank you very much for all of your work.
Rally
You
us.
really,
Yeah.
truly did rally the group and
You
keep us
really
on
did.
task. Without you, we couldn't have gotten
Thank you.
where it got to.
And thank you, thanks to the municipal staff as well that supported this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of time.
And Bonnie and Ian were very helpful.
Uh-huh.
Bonnie, she did a lot of work.
I think Bonnie's watching on.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, on top of your other job responsibilities, evenings, weekends. Thank you.